All right, today we're going to talk about tuning your 7 or 10 inch quadcopter. Yeah, the Shen Jones Thick, the one down below, I helped tune that. It's no surprise that as with every quad, the mechanical performance is paramount in getting a good tune. Bad mechanical is going to lead to vibrations and electrical issues that are going to be really hard to overcome with the firmware and software. You can try to cover them up with filtering or make up for them in PIDs, but it's really like pushing a rope up a hill. So starting with a base foundation of good mechanical setup and good electrical isolation is key. The two main things that I see for that are props, and the second thing is electrical isolation, and there it's just capacitors. I've never seen anything really outperform having 4 ESCs, individual ESCs, and then a capacitor on the ESC lines back to the flight controller or PDB. So if you have any choices, that's what I would recommend, especially for a larger craft. And did I mention props are important? So having good props, bi-blades or tri-blades, especially for a 6, 7, 10 inch or 12 inch, it's just critical. You can't have them super off balance. They can't be all kinds of wonky and floppy. If you're trying to use airplane props, you may need to balance them. So finding a good set, working with your Facebook groups, and getting a good set of props is key. What also becomes really important is you can see just the arm thickness. So for a 5-inch quad, we're talking about 4mm thick arms, but for a 7 to 10, you should be really thinking 5 or 6mm thick arms. You can get away with 4 as well, but obviously the larger the arm is, the thicker you want that carbon to be, just so you don't have the flexing and vibrations kind of resonating through there and magnifying as it goes back to the flight controller. Of course, as we get into these larger quad classes, we also have larger antennas sticking up longer, so on and so forth. So you really got to pay attention to their vibrations and making sure that everything's as tight and as firm as it can be, rigid, good props, again, good props, and good electrical isolation with those caps and individual ESCs if you can. So how are we going to tell if we have a good mechanical system? Well, we're going to go fly it. The first thing I would do is get RPM filter set up. So that's bidirectional D-shot here. If you have BLHeli ESCs, that should work as long as they're on the latest version of BLHeli 32. If you have BLHeli ESCs, you can use JESC or Jazz Maverick, whichever. That gives you bidirectional. You don't have to have RPM filtering, but it surely does help, especially with large quads, because there's a tendency to have some vibrations down low that if you can free up the dynamic notch to not worry about the motor traces and the RPM notches are doing the motor traces, then that dynamic notch can work over down here in the lower frequencies to hit any peaks that come up there from frames or whatever. As you can see on this configuration screen, we have D-Shot 300, and I would just pick 4K for your PID loop. So that's what I would enter to start here. For the PIDs, I would just go everything default for the first flight or maiden. Then for the filter setup, I would leave these as 1. Have 3 for your harmonics. Set your min down a little lower. Set your width to 0, Q250, min here down to 80 as well. And then set your max at 350. That will limit the range of the dynamic notch to only go up to 350 hertz. That will keep it in low mode so that you'll have a little bit more fidelity on where the notch actually positions for any peaks down below 350 hertz. And the RPM notches will take any care of any vibrations up above 350 hertz. Of course, I'm going to recommend logging it, so that's the only way you can see for sure what the motor vibrations are, unless you have tons and tons and tons of experience and you can like listen for it and just know what bad vibes are versus good. But that takes years of flying these things that honestly rarely people have that kind of skill. So black box kind of levels the playing field and everybody can easily look at it. There's lots of videos that I have and everybody else has about what good raw motor noise looks like, and we're going to show you here in a second. So we're going to set that at 2K sampling rate, gyro scale to record the raw noise, and we'll look at that in black box. For black box, you don't need to set it as a mode. If you just have it set here to either flash or on your SD card, of course, make sure you put an SD card if you have it set to SD card. Set this up. If as soon as you arm, black box will start to record. You don't have to have it set in a mode for it to work or not work. So we're going to specifically look at the noise profile, the raw noise for this 10-inch quadcopter and see what it looks like and see what you should be trying to shoot for as a goal. Can be a little worse, can be a little bit better, but this is generally a good goal for what the raw noise should look like. If you have this, what we're about to show, then it's in good shape. You can kind of move on. So Black Box is pretty straightforward. You download the log, you get the Black Box Explorer from Betaflight GitHub. I'll drop links down below. You go ahead, hit open, you open the log file. Then if you want to get the trace templates I have, I'll drop a link and put a card for the UAV Tech Black Box 101 where we talk about the UAV Tech trace templates. You would go ahead and open the log. You'd hit open up here, open the log file, then you'd hit open again, load the UAV Tech JSON file. You can go ahead then press 0 on your keyboard. It's the numbers above the letters, not the keypad, and then that will show you these traces. You can see here the raw noise is this red stuff, and then as it's filtered down, that gives you this, I don't know, purple, blue, purplish color here. It's cyan down here. And that is the filtered gyro signal. We'll go ahead and click on the bar in the legend here, and that will give us the spectrograph of the raw noise. We can do that for roll, we can do that for pitch, and we can do that for yaw. This was logged with a 1 kilohertz sampling rate. That's why it stops at 500 hertz, because of this thing called the Nyquist frequency. We're not going to talk about that. But if yours at 2 kilohertz, you'll actually go up to 1,000 here. It's always, Nyquist is always half the sampling frequency. So you'll see a little bit more length on that. You can see some noise goes above 500 hertz, and that's why we want to log at 2 kilohertz. But this is fine. And generally for larger quads, the vibrations are down lower. You can see right here, this is a good raw noise performance. Mainly what you're trying to look for here on larger crafts is that we don't have a bunch of garbage down here between, I don't know, 20 hertz up to 100 hertz. We got to have that. We have to have this trough that you see right here. On a smaller quadcast, you'll see that trough extends out farther. It will go, from 20 hertz all the way up to around 200 hertz. But on larger quads, props are larger, things of that nature, your motor band range is gonna be between 100 hertz, 120 hertz, up to around 350, hence that dynamic notch range, bringing that down. So your RPM notches will work in between here. You can see we're gonna let the RPM notches go down as low as 80 hertz. Same thing for the dynamic notch. And then the rest of it's low pass filters. Honestly, down here is your control frequencies. So if you do see stuff in the spectrographs like peaks down here and you were doing a lot of prop wash moves, that could just be the prop wash itself. Prop wash is between 20 and 60 hertz. Large crafts is probably going to be more like the 30s and 40s just because the power to weight ratio is a little bit lower. So don't get too hung up on those. And honestly, when you're doing your first flights, the best thing is to do is just try not to induce prop wash moves. Just try to go out there and do a lot of full throttle punches, fly it around, give it a good hard flight. But, you're not trying to induce prop wash specifically. If you do, it's not an issue. Just be aware that this peaks down here might be that. Or it could be other things as well. So that's kind of why I say try not to induce prop wash. Then it's not prop wash if there's other peaking issues down there. So again, generally on your raw noise profile, this is what we want to see. This was roll. This is pitch. Pitch is looking real good here. And then this is yaw. For your filtered noise profile, you can see if we go over here to roll. We're really cleaning everything up. There's a little bit of vibrations going on down here that could be filtered out a little bit more, but it's pretty low. Again, pitch, how that looks for filter gyro noise, and then yaw as well. So after you see your raw noise, and if you see it's looking something like I just showed there, what you can do is go back and then start moving these sliders up, generally keeping them together, moving up 1 or 2 notches at a time. And again, you're trying to get to something that looks like this, but it's not much worse than that for noise. You want to have, it's going to have some amplitude of noise down in here. It's not going to be completely flatline dead, but it's not going to be big peaks and things that you're missing. The other thing you really want to look at is on this trace template, which again was 0, you can come down to the bottom and hit D for roll and pitch, and then you can look at those and you can see how the D term really amplifies any of that noise that's on the gyro remaining yet after the filtering. Again, that was roll. Now this is pitch, and we don't have a D term on for yaw, so that's not on there. But you can see this is still pretty good D term noise performance. So kind of gives you a visual sense of what the goals are. And again, just use those sliders to move up or down. And maybe you have to leave them at 1.0. That's fine. That's not an issue. If you do, you do. If you can slide them up, do that. If you need to slide them down, I would probably work on your mechanical. I wouldn't be having a tendency to slide them down. If you have no other choice, then that's what you got to do. But your latency starts to get pretty good. It's already pretty good at 1. That gives you a general guide. Hopefully, if you have any questions, drop them in the comments. I'll be happy to address them. So after you have the filters worked out, now let's move on to the fun part, the PID tuning. It's critical to go in the sequence I'm talking about. The mechanical first, then getting the filters where they need to be, then moving on to the PID tuning. For the initial PID tuning, we're not just going to fly around. We're going to do specific induced stepped moves. We're going to try to push that PID controller, but we want to isolate some things down so we can make it a little easier on ourselves for, again, tuning out the PIDs. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and turn off D-min. Some people will do that. Some people will recommend not. I recommend turning it off. I want to simplify things as much as I can so I know what I'm looking at when I'm looking at logs and general flight characteristics. So we're going to go ahead and turn off the D-min for now. We're going to take feed forward. We're going to smooth that slider all the way to the bottom. We're going to go ahead and adjust our I-term relax to 10. And for larger crafts, that might even need to be 5. So 10 is the max. 5, like that thick, that needed to be down to 5 for that to work. It was just, the power to weight ratio was pretty low. I mean, you saw it had that huge massive camera on top and huge massive batteries on the bottoms. And yes, it did have 8 motors, but nevertheless, there was a lot of weight on that thing. So that needed to be down to 5 for that to work. Again, as your higher quad, like a 10-inch or a 12-inch, depends on if you have the beefy enough motors. Generally, you want to be looking at larger diameter motors for larger crafts, for these larger props. So you want to be thinking above, you want to be thinking like 28 something, 2804, 2806. Larger diameter motors, smaller motors are going to give a really low power to weight ratio. But general advice, set the I-term relax to 10. The next thing we want to do is take the master multiplier and slide that up to around a 1.5. Generally, with larger diameter prop quads, the power to weight ratio is worse. So the quad is heavier, but the power of the motors in the thrust column has not gone up proportionately with the weight. You think, well, you have a larger diameter prop, that should give me more thrust. Now, it gives you more efficiency. However, that prop takes more energy to spin it, and that motor diameter has not really increased a lot. Now, if you've increased your motor diameter a lot by the 28 something or 20, even bigger, if you can find anything like that, then yes, maybe moving this master slider up. But generally what I see that most people miss in tuning a 6, 7, or 10 or 12-inch quad is they're not accounting for the power to weight ratio is a lot lower. So you have to move your PIDs up. That's what the master multiplier slider is for, to account for that. So again, we're going to move that up to a 1.5. The final thing we're going to want to do is increase our PID sum limits. So we don't have to worry about the PID sum limiting that's in there by default, constraining the performance of the PID loop and us not realizing it. So what I'm going to do is copy these 2 CLI commands. And if you've not caught on already, I have a whole document on the practice of PID tuning principles that I will link down below. It's tiny.cc/PID tuning. And it basically, that's what we're walking through. This PID tuning principles and the steps we're going through, you do this for every quad class. It doesn't matter if it's a whoop or a 15-inch quad. This is how you tune a PID controller. So the next thing we're going to do is step moves, but we're going to go ahead and paste the CLI quick. So we'll go into our CLI, paste those 2 PID sum limit increases, go ahead and hit save. With those settings, the next thing we're going to do is do a PID tuning flight. And a PID tuning flight is very specific. You're not just going around and flying around and doing your favorite moves. We're trying to go out and get, the first thing we see here is smooth forward flight. Not touching the sticks, just letting it cruise, nice, smooth forward flight. See if there's any wobbles or bobbles, see what we need to do there. Next after that, we want to do some clean roll moves that are just on the roll axis, and then also flips, which are just on the pitch axis. Do a couple of those, couple rolls, couple flips, do a bunch of them so you can see what those look like, see if there's any bounce back in the HD, and then also see if there's any bounce back in the logging. After the rolls and the flips, then we want to do some snap moves on the roll axis and some snap moves on the pitch axis so we can see if some half rate moves and how the PID loops react and see if we're getting any bounce back, see if we're getting any overshoot in, again, the HD, and more easily, that I see it at least, in the logging. Of course, we don't want to neglect the yaw, so we want to go out and get some yaw twitch moves, full rate and half moves to see, again, do we get any bounce back? How's it looking in the HD? Also, how's it looking in the black box logging? And finally, we want to do some full throttle punches where we, jam the throttle full, let off of it, do some throttle pumping up and down, see if we're getting bobble in the nose or if we're getting dips when we're getting off the throttle. That will tell us what we need to do with the tune for different aspects of anti-gravity, PD gain, so on and so forth. Now here kind of comes the tricky part, is you want to actually take it, if it's flying okay with that, you actually want to push it a little bit to start to get some overshoot and dial it back just a notch after that. So What we're going to do first is dial in the PD balance. We want to have the P term as high as it can be in relation to the D term without having overshoot or bounce back. The best advice I can give is PDD bounce back is going to be really sharp and fast, like so quick it's going to be really hard to see it in the HD footage. You'll easily see it in logging. But for these flights coming up, what you want to do is just do a bunch of flights and keep moving this PDD balance slider lower. So yes, in Betaflight 4.2, they've reversed the P to D balance slider. And so as you move the P to D balance slider down, the D term goes down. As you move it up now, the D term goes up. So to get a higher P to D balance, you actually move the slider down. Isn't that confusing? I thought so too. But that's how it is. You move the D term down. The reason they did it the other way is because they felt like, increasing this increases dampening. That's just not how my brain works with it. But nevertheless, you move this down and go ahead and move it down one notch at a time. Do those full rate flips and rolls, each axis at a time, the half rate steps as well. In the HD, again, you're looking for that sharp, sharp bounce back. Just keep moving this down until you get that sharp, sharp bounce back. And then once you get that, just slide it one position back up. That's basically honed in then on your P2D balance. For a little guidance, typically what I'll see with helping a bunch of people tune quads is the P2D balance is generally anywhere between 1 and 1.5. So for example, moving the slider one notch down is about a 1.5, and moving the slider up to about this position is of course a 1. This said, you can have situations where it's inversed, where you're actually below a 1. And that with larger crafts and with whoops, when your power to weight ratio is really low, like with whoops or 10 inch, or that inverses a lot of times where you're actually at a 0.8, so on and so forth. So you're most likely with a larger craft going to be up in this range somewhere. Could be, down, this would be a 1.5. I've not really seen them anywhere above in a 1.5 for a PDD balance on any craft so far. So just don't overthink this. Just let the craft response be the guide. Just keep moving this. Either, start down here, so you should get bounce back, I would think, and then just keep moving that till you don't get bounce back. Keep moving it up, moving it up, moving it up until you don't get bounce back. The sharp bounce back from D to D balance. You should not be getting overshoot with this I-term relax set, locking the I-term. You shouldn't be getting overshoot. If you are, you just keep sliding that up until it stops. Now, as you're doing the PDD bounce back and tuning, make sure that your D terms are generally up. You should be 40, in my opinion, you should be in the 45s and north on D term, just for keeping the general order magnitude of your PID strength in check. This is the part where I see the biggest mistakes with large craft tuning, is people are stuck in the 5-inch world mindset of, oh my gosh, a P or a D term above in the 30s is high. Not for large crafts, it's not. Not for whoops, it's not either. When you have a low power to weight ratio, those are generally, the D term gains are generally 45 and up. I've seen them up to 100. So the next part is really the fun part, where if you had some decently high D gains, 45s, 50s in that area when you're trying to figure out this PDD balance, and once you got that kind of locked in, you're not getting bounce back, but it was like you moved stuff, you keep moving this down until you got bounce back and then slid it one notch back up, so you have that max P bounce or P gain. Once you have that kind of honed in, the next part is the fun part, where you go out and start doing more and more aggressive flights, and you keep sliding this PD gain slider up one notch at a time, and go out, do some more fun flights, keep sliding this up, keep sliding this up. And this part is where you're trying to stamp out prop wash. So as you slide that up, you should see your prop wash performance increase. You should see your stability increase. You should see that the nose is going to hold on to sticks. You should see your throbbles, when you're getting on the throttle and chopping it, or, full throttle punch and this chopping the throttle, you should see that get better and better and better as you increase this PD gain slider. How do you know you've gone too far with the PD gain slider? You will start to hear high oscillation trilling. As you're moving this slider up, be careful. Keep checking those motor temps. Make sure your motors don't get hot. If you start to hear a trilling or an oscillation, obviously you've gone too far. You want to back that back down. Or your motors start to get too warm. You want to back that back down. Or if in smooth forward flight it's kind of shaky and jittery, you can either back that down a little bit, or we can introduce the next thing, D-min. Well, I hope that was helpful. And again, see the link below if you want this in a text write-up kind of format that goes into some more details. PID tuning principles. Again, it's tiny.cc/PID tuning. So hopefully it's something easy to remember as well. If you enjoyed this content and it helped you, please consider being a subscriber, hitting that like button, and check out the Patreon. So I'm going to be working on adding Patreon-specific content for those folks, since I do appreciate their support. Please check out the description for a bunch of links to a Facebook group and some other channels for interacting with groups of people that help each other out through tunes. So I help people out as much as I can, wherever I can. However, I do provide tuning assistance as a service if that's something you're interested in. Again, check out the links below in the video description. Thanks everybody for your time, and I do hope this helped.
And smash that like button, please. 'Cause then if you guys get me 1 billion likes, then I can make videos that are Fortnite. So, do you want Fortnite videos or this video? What's better?